"You shouldn't be out here alone, sir, not dressed like that in the South Bronx at 3 in the morning." The man gave no reply. He stood hunched at the curb, rain drumming on his $1,000 coat, polished shoes sinking into a shallow puddle along the cracked sidewalk. Then, without warning, his knees gave way. He pitched forward, face first into the cold, slick asphalt. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Across the street, 2 men in hooded jackets leaned against the wall of a closed liquor store. One nudged the other, tilting his chin toward the stranger. Their interest was unmistakable, and not the friendly kind. They stepped off the curb. Lila Johnson didn't wait to see their intentions. She darted into the street, rain stinging her face, and knelt beside the man. "Sir, hey," she called, leaning close. Up close she could see he was older, 50s maybe, well-groomed and clearly not from the neighborhood. A luxury watch gleamed on his wrist. His wallet lay nearby, open and vulnerable. She looked up again. The 2 men were closing in, no more than a dozen steps away now. "Nope. Not tonight," Lila muttered. With more strength than she thought she had, she hooked her arms beneath his and hauled him upright, half carrying, half dragging him toward the side entrance of the Elwood Gray Inn. He groaned incoherently, but his legs moved just enough to keep from dragging. They slipped inside just as the strangers reached the curb. Lila didn't glance back. Inside, the hallway lights buzzed overhead, casting a tired yellow glow across the scuffed tile floor. She eased him onto a bench by the laundry room. His head lolled to one side, soaked hair plastered to his forehead, breath thick with the smell of whiskey. Fighting a flicker of guilt, she rifled through his wallet for identification. A gold-trimmed business card caught her eye. "Harold Knox." She blinked. "Wait, that Harold Knox?" "Andy," she called to the front desk clerk. "Can you verify this ID?" Andy returned moments later, eyes wide. "Holy hell," he whispered. "That's him. That's really him." Lila didn't hesitate. She pulled out her phone and ordered a cab. "I'm not letting him crash here, and I'm definitely not letting some shady Uber driver skim his cards while he's out cold." 15 minutes later, the cab pulled up. Lila slid a 50 from her own wallet, folded it tight, and pressed it into the driver's hand before he could speak. "Don't charge him. Just get him home, he's not all there right now." The cabbie arched a brow but nodded. Lila turned to guide Harold into the back seat. His body leaned into her with the weight of someone who'd let go of the wheel. As she fastened the belt, he mumbled something. "You good people," he slurred. "Don't forget. You're the kind that matters." She said nothing, closing the door softly. The cab rolled away into the mist, taillights glowing faintly through the fog. Inside, she stood still for a moment, letting the quiet settle. Her shoes squelched with water. Her hoodie clung damply to her shoulders. The clock above the front desk read 3:52 a.m. Just another night at the Elwood Gray. Except, it didn't feel like it. She made her way to the staff locker room, peeling off her wet hoodie and twisting the sleeves to wring out the water. She couldn't say for sure what had driven her to act tonight. Instinct, maybe, or a stubborn refusal to watch one more person collapse while the world turned away. Outside, the storm began to break. Far above the rooftops of the South Bronx, the first light of dawn cracked the sky open, quiet, steady, and unstoppable. The following Thursday, just before the lunch rush, Lila was at the far end of the bar, folding stacks of cocktail napkins. The bell over the entrance gave a crisp chime. She didn't look up. Probably Mr. Travers, the regular who always asked for extra lemon in his iced tea and never tipped more than a nickel. "Excuse me," a voice said, smooth, low, and refined. She lifted her gaze, already shaping a polite smile, then froze. Standing there, dressed in a flawlessly tailored suit, hair swept neatly back, eyes sharp and intent, was the same man she'd dragged off the sidewalk a week ago. Gone was the half-conscious, rain-soaked stranger. In his place stood someone poised, powerful, and entirely in control. Lila's fingers tightened around the napkin. "I believe I owe you a proper thank you," he said. The entire bar seemed to pause. Even Andy at the front desk leaned out from behind his monitor. Nora, the morning housekeeper, suddenly discovered an urgent reason to polish the countertop right beside them. Lila didn't blink. "Looks like you're walking just fine." "I'd say the cab did its job," Harold replied, stepping closer, voice calm but certain. "It wasn't the cab that saved me that night. I didn't do anything anyone else wouldn't have done," she said, folding her arms. "Then it's a shame no one else did." His gaze swept the room before returning to her. "I looked into you, Miss Johnson." A knot tightened in her stomach. "I'm sure you did. You left college at 19 to care for your mother. You've worked 3 jobs at once, kept this place running while the manager pocketed money off the books, and covered more guest damages from your own pocket than any employee should. You even paid my cab fare when you thought I couldn't handle it." Lila's eyes narrowed. "You're making a lot of assumptions." "No," he said quietly. "I'm stating facts." A long silence stretched between them. Then Harold reached into his coat, withdrew a slim leather folder and set it gently on the counter. "I own this property," he said evenly, "and several others. But this one, the Elwood Gray, has been on the chopping block for a while now. Underperforming. Poor management. Low returns. I was ready to liquidate." Lila's throat tightened. "If you're firing me, you came overdressed." "I'm not firing you," Harold replied. His tone was calm, deliberate. "I'm offering you ownership." The napkin in her hand tore cleanly in two. "What?" The word came out louder than she meant. He didn't flinch. "You're the only reason this place is still standing. The only reason guests still come through the doors. I've run the numbers. I've reviewed the surveillance from that night. You didn't have to do what you did." His gaze held hers. "You could have left me on that sidewalk like everyone else. People don't just hand over hotels," Lila said, her voice taut. "Especially not to worn-out waitresses in the Bronx. People don't usually save billionaires from freezing to death in the rain," he replied. She stared at him, caught between the urge to laugh and the urge to scream. "So this is what, some rich man's redemption tour?" His smile faded. "This isn't about guilt. It's about recognition." "I don't need your recognition," she shot back. "No," he said softly, "but you deserve it." The folder on the counter stayed where it was. She eyed it like it might bite. "I need time," she said at last. "You've got it," Harold replied, nudging the folder closer. "Everything's in there: legal transfer, debt clearances, renovation grants. My lawyer will walk you through every detail. And if you say no, I'll respect that. But I hope you won't." He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "There's something about you, Lila. You don't wait for permission to do what's right. That's rare." And then he was gone. Just like that, Lila stood frozen, wrapped in a silence thick enough to feel. Around her, people pretended not to stare. Nora muttered under her breath, "You gonna open that thing?" Lila's gaze stayed on the folder. "I don't even know what's in it." "You just got handed a miracle, girl," Nora said. "Might want to see if it's real." Later that night, after wiping down the bar and locking the front doors, Lila sat alone in the empty lobby. The folder rested on her lap, still closed. She checked her phone. No messages, no missed calls. Her mother was already asleep at the care home. The silence made the walls seem louder. Finally she opened it. Inside were documents, stamped, signed, and pre-approved by lawyers she'd never met. A detailed breakdown of the hotel's debts, most of them already cleared through wire transfers from a shell corporation. There was a proposed renovation budget, a training grant, all filed under her name. Tucked into the final page was a handwritten note. "You gave a stranger dignity. Let this give you the same." Lila closed the folder, pressed her palm against its cover, and shut her eyes. This was insane, impossible, but maybe, just maybe, it was real. And if it was, her life was about to change forever. Lila didn't sleep that night. She lay on her futon, the folder still open beside her, staring at the ceiling of her cramped apartment above the laundromat. The air carried the faint scent of dryer sheets and bleach. The steady hum of the machines below was oddly soothing, but her thoughts spun like loose coins in a dryer. A hotel, her hotel. No, it couldn't be real. Not without strings. No one handed over that kind of power without wanting something in return. And yet, the paperwork sat there, thick, dry, undeniably legal. Every page notarized. Every line precise. Harold Knox hadn't just made a promise, he'd already set the pieces in motion. She picked up her phone and dialed the care home. Her mother's voice crackled through the line, soft, raspy, edged with sleep. "Lila, baby, it's 2 in the morning." "I know," Lila whispered. "But what if something big just happened? What if something impossible?" Her mother gave a faint chuckle, a fragile sound shaped by years of fatigue. "Did you finally win the lottery?" "Worse," Lila said, her throat tight with tears. I think someone just gave me a hotel. There was a long pause. Then, well damn. The next morning, Lila walked into the Elwood Gray Inn, not as a waitress but as its possible new owner. The air felt heavier somehow. Even the old chandelier above the lobby seemed to sway with more judgment than usual. Andy glanced up as she stepped behind the front desk. You opened that folder yet? Yeah. He gave a low whistle. So, what now? Lila didn't answer. Instead, she pushed open the office door behind the lobby, a space she'd only glimpsed when Carl, the former manager, emerged in a cloud of cigar smoke, barking orders about linens or liquor shipments. The room was stale with neglect, stacked high with dusty invoices, splintered chairs, and a calendar from 2014 still pinned crookedly to the wall. She drew in a steady breath and stepped inside. For the rest of the day, Lila vanished into that office. She dug through stacks of files, combed over vendor lists, and dialed the phone numbers printed on the invoices. Some lines were dead. Others picked up with unfamiliar voices and evasive answers. More than once, she ended the call mid-sentence when something felt off. By noon, she'd confirmed at least 3 vendors in the books didn't exist. Crane Cleaning Company had no tax ID. Metro Fire Systems was tied to a P.O. box in Delaware. One invoice listed thousands spent on HVAC diagnostic updates that had never happened. This wasn't simple neglect. It was a mess. Intentional. Possibly criminal. At 3 o'clock, she dialed the number listed for Harold's legal representative. A calm, clipped voice answered. Brenda Whitlow speaking. This is Lila Johnson. I was told you're handling the transfer for the Elwood Gray Inn, Lila said. Yes, Miss Johnson. Everything's in order. We're only waiting on your signature to finalize the ownership change. Do you have any questions? Yeah, Lila replied. Why would someone hand me a business drowning in fake expenses and phantom vendors? A brief pause crackled over the line. Mr. Knox believes in second chances, Brenda said. He also believes in your ability to repair what others have broken. Lila's voice hardened. I'm not here to clean up a mess that rich men made while looking the other way. Then don't, Brenda replied evenly. Make it yours. Burn what you need. Rebuild. That night, Lila stayed long after the lobby went dark. She tugged the broken blinds closed in the office, poured herself a cup of coffee from the front desk pot, and spread every invoice across the floor like puzzle pieces waiting to be sorted. Near midnight, Nora leaned against the doorway, a Tupperware container in hand. Figured you'd still be here, she said. Brought sweet potatoes. Want some? Lila looked up, drained but appreciative. Please. They ate cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by dust and towers of paperwork. You really going through with this? Nora asked between mouthfuls. I don't know yet, Lila admitted. Part of me thinks I'm out of my mind. The other part, she exhaled slowly, I think I've already begun. You've always been the only one around here with any sense. Lila gave a faint smile. Carl sure didn't think so. Nora snorted. Carl didn't like anyone calling out his cigar tab or the vanishing cash from the drawer. You take this place over, Lila, and the right people will back you. Lila glanced around the office, this forgotten, neglected space that had once pulsed as the heart of the hotel. Now it thrummed with something else entirely. Possibility. The next morning she came back with clean clothes, a fresh notebook and a carefully scribbled list. Her first move was to meet with every staff member one-on-one. She asked questions. She listened. Some, like Nora and Andy, were on board from the start. Others, like Diego in maintenance, smirked at the thought of the waitress playing boss. Lila didn't blink. By Friday, a crisp notice appeared on the bulletin board. Effective immediately, the Elwood Gray Inn is under new ownership. We rebuild from the inside out. If you're in, I'll see you Monday at 9 a.m. If not, I wish you well. Lila Johnson. That weekend she barely slept. When Monday came, she stood at the front desk with a fresh pot of coffee, a clipboard, and her pulse pounding like a war drum. At 8:57, Nora strolled in wearing her worn-out sneakers and a fresh coat of lipstick. At 9 o'clock sharp, Andy arrived, arms loaded with 3 neat spreadsheets. At 9:05, Mila from housekeeping slipped in quietly, eyes down, but offering a single, decisive nod. By 9:30, 12 employees had come back. Lila stood before them, barely breathing. I'm not a CEO. I'm not a miracle worker. But I'm here. And if we rebuild this place the right way, none of us will have to go home ashamed anymore. Silence. Then Nora clapped, once. Andy followed. And then the whole room joined in. Not loud, not showy, but steady, solid, real. Lila exhaled for the first time in days. The rebuild had begun. Her first week as owner of the Elwood Grey was like trying to patch a leaky roof in the middle of a hurricane. Fix one hole, 3 more opened. The boiler died on Wednesday. The Friday delivery never arrived. And a guest in room 206 swore a ghost stole her earrings, though Lila suspected the culprit was a sagging ceiling and a loose floorboard. Still, something had shifted. Staff began arriving early. Mila, who used to sneak out 15 minutes before her shift ended, was now staying after hours to reorganize the supply closets. Even Diego, once openly skeptical, repaired the hot water pipe without needing to be chased down. There was movement, a pulse, a heartbeat. But beneath the small victories, something darker stirred. Thursday morning, deep in the back office, Lila was combing through vendor contracts when a name kept appearing. Keystone Holdings. It was on invoices for pest control, elevator maintenance, even linen services. A company that seemed to do everything, except Lila had never met a single person from it. And the amounts, always just under 5,000, were too precise to be coincidence. Like someone was deliberately keeping each payment beneath the threshold that would trigger attention. Lila leaned back in the squeaky office chair, staring at the neat black print. Keystone Holdings. Midtown Manhattan address. Suite number. She pulled out her phone and dialed. 2 rings. A robotic voice. This number has been disconnected. Her jaw tightened. She tried another. Nash Financial Group, listed on an invoice for a security system upgrade, dated 6 months earlier. Same result. Her pulse quickened. Nora, she called into the hallway. A moment later, Nora appeared in the doorway, wiping flour off her apron with the back of her wrist, one eyebrow raised. If you're about to ask me to fix the ice machine again, forget it. Nearly fried myself last time. Lila gave a quick laugh, then her expression sobered. Do you remember any vendors called Keystone Holdings? Or Nash Financial? Nora's brow knit. Keystone, yeah. Carl used to mutter about them when the books didn't add up. Said they handled things. Lila tilted her head. Handled what exactly? Nora hesitated, her eyes sliding toward the dusty stack of invoices on the desk. Stuff you didn't want written down. Never met a soul from there, Nora said. You digging into old ghosts? Maybe, Lila murmured. Or something worse. That night, long after the last guest had retreated upstairs, Lila sat in the office, surrounded by paper like a crime scene in progress. Folders gaped open. Invoices and receipts spilled across the floor in messy constellations. Yellow sticky notes bloomed everywhere, marking patterns, repeated vendor names, suspiciously round amounts, deliveries that never seemed to arrive. 3 names surfaced again and again. Keystone Holdings, Nash Financial, Eastgate Logistics. Each had billed thousands for work she couldn't verify. And each had ties to Carl and whoever had created these phantom vendor accounts. By midnight, her temples throbbed, but the shape of it all was coming into focus. This wasn't sloppiness. It was theft, quiet, calculated, and old. She rose, crossed to the back wall, and unlocked the cabinet she'd ignored for days, the one she'd found a rusted key for, wedged between couch cushions in the lounge. Inside, cardboard boxes. Ledgers, not spreadsheets, thick, handwritten, and smelling of dust and ink. She slid one free, brushing it off before flipping to a flagged page. March laundry service diversion. Line after line of transactions that existed nowhere in the hotel's digital files. Hundreds, sometimes thousands, funneled to names that appeared on no vendor list. Fake contracts. Mirror invoices. Her breath caught. This wasn't incompetence. It was laundering. She leaned back, knuckles white on the edges of the ledger. Her fingers trembled. Her phone buzzed. A text from Andy. Hey, FYI, some guy in a suit came by asking about the new owner. Said he was an old friend of Carl's. Didn't leave a card. Weird vibe. Lila didn't reply. She shut the ledger, slid it into her bag, and locked the rest back in the cabinet. The next morning, she called Brenda Whitlow, Harold's legal representative. Miss Whitlow, Lila began, voice steady but low, did you or Mr. Knox ever look into Carl's finances before the transfer? Pause. He was advised to walk away clean, Brenda said. Mr. Knox didn't want to inherit baggage. Well, Lila said, he might have given me more than a hotel. I think someone's been laundering money through this place, and they might still be at it. I'll inform Mr. Knox, Brenda replied evenly. But be careful, Lila. People who build schemes like that don't like the lights turned on. Lila ended the call and stood still in the office, eyes closed, palm pressed flat against the cold steel of the cabinet. This wasn't just her problem anymore. She had not inherited a business, she had inherited a battlefield. And it wasn't a battlefield you could see from the street. The front door still opened with a polite chime, the front desk still had its neat row of guest pens, and the smell of brewed coffee still drifted through the lobby. But under all of it, there was shrapnel, years of quiet damage buried in ledgers, in fake invoices, in the shadows of vendor names no one had ever met. By late afternoon, she called the staff together for an unscheduled meeting. The request alone drew wary glances. They gathered in the lobby in a loose half-circle. Nora still dusted with flour from the kitchen, Andy with a pen tucked behind his ear, Mila in her housekeeping polo, hands clasped like she'd been caught in the wrong room. Above them, the chandelier flickered twice, its bulbs stuttering. Normally, someone would have cracked a joke about ghosts or overdue wiring, but today the silence held. Lila stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but it carried an edge that made people stand a little straighter. I need to tell you something, she began. I think the Elwood Grey was used for more than hospitality in the past. Murmurs rose and fell. She went on. Some of the vendors we've been paying? They don't exist. And the money, it went somewhere. A beat of stillness settled over the group, heavy as wet cement. Nora's face tightened, her arms crossing as if to guard herself from what she might hear next. Mila looked down at the patterned carpet, jaw tight. Andy broke the silence. Do you think Carl was involved? I don't know yet, Lila admitted. But I do know this. If we keep moving forward without cleaning it out, we're building on poison. Nora spoke first, her voice low but firm. So, what do you need us to do? Lila's eyes swept the circle. These weren't corporate auditors or trained investigators. They were line cooks, receptionists, cleaners, people who had scraped tips together to make rent, people who had swallowed insults to keep their jobs. But now, standing here, they were hers. I need eyes. Stories, she said slowly, making sure every word landed. Anything strange Carl said, anything you saw that didn't make sense, no matter how small, bring it to me. The chandelier above gave one last flicker, as if it, too, understood something dangerous had just begun. Anyone who came by after hours. Any delivery that didn't feel right. Write it down. Tell me, Lila said, her tone clipped but steady. We piece it together. Nora gave a short nod. You got it. Mila hesitated, then raised her hand. There was a guy, a few months ago. Called himself Mr. V, real slick. Expensive watch, tailored suit. Drove a black BMW. He'd show up late at night, always went straight to Carl's office. Said they were discussing expansions. She gave a small, nervous laugh. I didn't trust him. My spine told me not to. Lila's pen paused midair. Mr. V. She added it to the growing column of names, her private list of shadows. That night, long after the staff had gone home and the Elwood Grey had gone still, she sat in the office with only the desk lamp casting a warm pool of light across the paperwork. The rest of the room was swallowed in shadow. Her laptop glowed in front of her as she typed, names, addresses, fragments of overheard conversations. She dug into every P.O. box, every disconnected number, every website that hadn't been updated in years. It was on the 5th search page of a buried forum, a thread so old the avatars were grainy, that she saw it. A comment on a whistleblower article, almost an afterthought in the middle of an argument. Keystone is a front. Check who's behind it. The guy with the initials VK. Lila's pulse hammered in her ears. She copied the thread into a folder on her desktop she had labeled only proof. She didn't know how far this went, not yet, but she knew she had found the rot. And she had no intention of letting it spread any further. 2 nights later, she was at the reception desk. On the surface, she looked like she was sorting reservation cards, flipping them idly, but her gaze stayed fixed on the glass entrance doors. Waiting. Watching. The lobby was hushed, the kind of quiet that made every sound stand out. The low hum of the vending machine in the corner, the occasional groan of old floorboards above. Nora had clocked out an hour ago. Mila was somewhere upstairs, her vacuum whirring faintly along the third-floor hallway. Andy was in the back office, murmuring numbers into the calculator like a prayer. But Lila wasn't moving. She was waiting. At exactly 9:42 p.m., the front doors swung open with a soft whoosh of air. He walked in like he belonged here. No, like he owned the place. Tall, tailored, not a hair out of place. Too polished, too deliberate to be from anywhere nearby. His suit was a deep charcoal that caught the light in subtle ripples, the kind of fabric that cost more than her monthly payroll. The cut was surgical. His cologne, sharp, expensive and faintly metallic, reached her before his words did. "Evening," he said, the curve of his lips forming a smile that stopped well short of his eyes. Lila stepped out from behind the desk, keeping her hands loose at her sides. "We're full tonight," she said evenly. He gave a low chuckle, smooth as poured oil. "That's a shame. I'm not here for a room." He glanced around the lobby, his gaze taking in the new drapes, the softer sconces, the polished wood trim. Just wanted to see what all the buzz was about. Lila stayed quiet, her eyes never leaving his. He took a step closer, his shoes whispering against the tile, and leaned back slightly as if tasting the air. "You've cleaned up quite a bit. I like the lighting changes, softer. Less interrogative." Her voice was calm when she finally spoke. "Do I know you?" He rested one hand on the counter between them, the gesture casual on the surface but waited, like a poker player laying down his first card. His gaze didn't waver. He let the silence swell until it nearly pressed on her ears. "Call me Victor." The name hit her like a cold hand to the spine. Vicky. The initials from the whistleblower thread. He slid a hand into the inner pocket of his coat and withdrew a black business card so sleek it seemed to swallow the light. No phone number. No address. Just his name in clean white type and a single gold-embossed V. He placed it on the counter between them with the care of someone setting down a loaded weapon. Lila didn't touch it. Victor's smile deepened, though his eyes stayed flat and watchful. "You've been busy," he said softly. "Calling vendors who were perfectly content to remain invisible. Digging through files most people would burn." "I'm just trying to run a hotel," she said. "No," he murmured almost kindly. "You're trying to play detective in a story you don't understand." Lila's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed steady. "You're right. I don't understand why someone like you would bother showing up at all unless there's something to hide." For the briefest flicker of a second, something tightened in his jaw. Then it was gone. "Smart girl," he said. But smart doesn't always mean safe. The air between them shifted, thicker, heavier, like the moment before a storm breaks. Victor straightened, his height suddenly more pronounced. "Walk away, Lila," he said. "Enjoy the hotel. Repaint the walls. Serve your peach cobbler, but stop chasing shadows. You're not built for what's behind them." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You don't scare me." One corner of his mouth ticked upward. "You should be." And then, without another word, he turned and walked out, the glass doors hissing closed behind him, leaving the scent of his cologne and the weight of his warning hanging in the empty lobby. No threats. No raised voice. Just calm, deliberate menace wrapped in a designer suit. Lila remained rooted in place until the door chime's faint echo dissolved into the hum of the vending machine. Only then did she exhale. She turned sharply and walked straight into the office. Andy looked up from the desk, mid-paperwork. "Everything okay?" "No," she said flatly. "Call Nora. Tell her to change every lock, front, back, storage, all of it, first thing tomorrow. And I want surveillance up and running before the weekend." Andy's brow furrowed. Was that the guy? She gave a single, deliberate nod. Victor Kingston. He was here. Andy's eyes widened. What did he want? To scare me? Later, at her kitchen table, the quiet of the apartment pressed in around her. The old ledger sat open, the pages smelling faintly of dust and mildew. Her laptop glowed beside it, casting blue light over the scattered notes and half-drunk coffee. Lila's fingers moved steadily, almost mechanically, pulling public business filings, cross-checking addresses, matching obscure LLC names to vague service contracts, tracing board members who seemed to appear and disappear across paper trails. It was exhausting work. But sometime past 2 a.m., the threads began to braid themselves into something undeniable. Victor Kingston wasn't just a visitor with a warning. He was tied, directly, to at least 3 shell companies that had billed the Elwood Gray through an intermediary called Slade Strategies. His portfolio reached quietly along the eastern seaboard, peppered with small-town hotels and inns that, on paper, barely scraped a profit. In reality, they were conduits, pale facades, pushing millions through ledgers that never told the truth. And now she had stepped between him and his current pipeline. The question wasn't whether he would come back. It was when. She copied everything, files, links, invoices, business registrations, onto a secure USB drive. Then she slid the small device into an envelope and scrawled a single word across the front in bold, block letters. Insurance. The envelope disappeared beneath the loose floorboard under her bed, where she hoped even Victor Kingston wouldn't think to look. By morning, the counterpunch began. At 8 a.m., the walk-in freezer gave out, again. Mila opened the heavy door to a blast of warm air and the stench of spoiled meat. Condensation dripped steadily from the ceiling onto the ruined crates below. At 9:30 a.m., the fire inspector appeared without warning, his clipboard already open. He cited them for 3 valentinations, one of them for a fire extinguisher that had passed inspection barely 3 weeks earlier. At 11:15 a.m., a delivery truck lurched backward into the loading dock. The impact cracked the concrete lip and sent 2 trash bins splintering to pieces. The driver climbed out, shaking his head, muttering about brake failure. By 2 p.m., Lila's hands trembled as she filled out yet another set of insurance forms. Nora sat opposite her in the lobby, arms crossed, gaze steady. "This ain't random," Nora said quietly. Lila didn't look up. "I know. So, what do we do?" Lila set her pen down, met her eyes. "We hold the line." That night, she gathered the staff in the lounge. The air felt heavy, the room too still. She didn't give them names or dates, just enough to prepare them. "That man who came by," she said evenly, "he's not here to negotiate. He's here to bully. And when bullies feel you pushing back," she let the pause hang, "they hit harder." Diego's voice broke the silence. "We could lose the place. We could," Lila said. Her tone carried no false hope, only resolve. "But if we give in now, it won't be ours anyway. But if we stay silent," Lila said, her voice low but clear, "we'll lose more than the hotel." Andy leaned forward, searching her face. "Then what are you going to do?" She met his gaze without blinking. "Tell the truth." That weekend, Lila dialed a number she'd been avoiding. Harold Knox. The man who had once handed her the keys to the Elwood Gray like a blessing, or a burden. When he picked up, his voice was worn thin, the kind that carried years of weight. "Lila. You gave me this hotel," she began. "Did you know what was behind it?" There was a pause long enough for her to hear the faint hum of the line. "I suspected," Harold said at last. "But I told myself it wasn't my problem anymore. It is now. I didn't mean for you to get pulled into this," he said quietly. "But I am." Her tone was steady, almost calm, though her pulse was anything but. "And I need to know, are you going to help me, or walk away again?" On the other end she heard a long, slow breath. "Tell me what you found." So she did. Every name. Every fake invoice. Every late-night visit. She laid the entire web out for him, thread by poisonous thread, until there was nothing left to hide. When she finished, the silence between them had changed, no longer evasive but forged into something harder. "I'll call someone I trust," Harold said finally. "Someone who doesn't owe Victor a damn thing." Lila closed her eyes. "Good. Because I'm not backing down." Outside, the wind picked up along the South Bronx streets, rattling loose signs and sending scraps of paper skittering into the dark. Trash skittered along the sidewalks like it was trying to outrun the wind. Inside the inn, Lila pushed open the front doors and stood framed in the threshold, watching dark clouds muscle their way across the sky. The storm was coming, but for the first time she wasn't bracing for it alone. 3 days later, she sat in the shadowed corner of a quiet diner in Mott Haven. The booth smelled faintly of coffee and bleach. Across from her, a woman in a navy trench coat methodically stirred her tea, the silver spoon clicking softly against porcelain. A press badge hung from her collar, catching the dim light. "I've read your emails," the woman said finally. "Listened to your voicemail 3 times. What you're sitting on?" She looked up, eyes sharp. "It's not small." "I know," Lila replied, voice steady. That's why I didn't send it through a tip line, she continued. I needed someone with teeth. The woman's mouth curved, not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement. Sarah Monroe. Investigative journalist, Bronx Gazette. 4 exposés. 3 lawsuits. 2 city council members ousted. I don't scare easy. I'm counting on that, Lila said, sliding a small flash drive across the Formica table. Sarah didn't touch it immediately. She just studied it. Then Lila. You realize, if I run this, it won't just hit Victor Kingston. If the laundering's real, if those offshore accounts trace back, it could topple businesses, banks, maybe even people you work with. Lila's jaw tightened. If they're guilty, she said, let them fall. Sarah finally reached for the drive, slipping it into her coat pocket like it was contraband. Then buckle up, Ms. Rivera, she murmured. Because when this lands, you're going to need more than locks on your doors. Sarah studied her for a long beat before taking the flash drive. All right, Miss Johnson, she said quietly, buckle in. Back at the Elwood Gray, the air felt different. The sabotage had stopped. No more surprise inspectors, no mysterious breakdowns, but the stillness was worse. It was the kind of quiet the ocean makes before a tidal wave swallows the shore. Every shadow stretched too long. Every knock at the door set her pulse climbing. Andy had started staying late just in case. Nora kept a bat propped behind the laundry room door. Mila walked Lila to her car after every shift, even though she only lived 4 blocks away. And through it all, Lila worked. She rebuilt the office, digitizing every file, installing real security cameras instead of Carl's plastic fakes, ripping out outdated vendor contacts and replacing them with a clean supply chain from scratch. She even renamed the manager's office Operations Center Nod, partly for a laugh, partly because it had become the beating heart of their quiet resistance. Every night, her eyes drifted to her phone, waiting for Sarah's signal. One evening it came. It's happening. Sunday morning. Front page. Lila didn't breathe for 10 full seconds. When the article dropped, it landed like a bomb. Headline: Local hotel at center of multi-million-dollar laundering scheme. Fraud network tied to high-profile hospitality investor. Sarah hadn't trimmed a single thorn, she named names. She didn't just tell the story, she mapped it. The article laid out invoices, flowcharts, offshore wire records, and even a scan of one of Carl's old hand-signed ledgers, neatly connecting it to a Victor-controlled shell. By mid-morning, the internet was on fire. Lila's phone lit up in a relentless churn. Reporters, podcasters, local radio producers, curious food bloggers wanting to know if the peach cobbler was still on the menu. Then the police came. 2 unmarked sedans rolled up just after noon. Lila was at the front desk when the detectives walked in, both in plain clothes, one flipping open a badge. We'd like to speak with Miss Lila Johnson. That's me, she said, steady as a metronome. In the back office they were courteous but sharp. What made you start digging into the vendors? Because it didn't add up, she replied. And because too many people assumed I wouldn't ask. They asked for the flash drives, she handed them duplicates. They asked about threats, she slid Victor's card across the desk. When the detectives finally left, half the staff had gathered in the lobby watching through the glass. Lila stepped out and met their eyes. I'm not in trouble, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. But the people who were using this hotel for crime? Lila added. They are. The tension broke. The group exhaled almost in unison, like a room finally letting go of a held breath. That night, she was back in the same corner booth at the Mott Haven Diner, hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug of decaf while her body hummed with the kind of adrenaline that feels like it should burn out but never does. You handled yourself like a pro, Sarah said, watching her over the rim of her tea. Not bad for a hotel manager. Technically, I was a waitress a month ago. Sarah's mouth curved. Not anymore. Lila stared into the swirl of cream in her coffee. I just wanted a place that felt safe. Somewhere my mom could walk into and be proud. I didn't sign up to take down an interstate fraud ring. Nobody signs up, Sarah replied, leaning back. But when the moment shows up at your table, you either stand or you shrink. Lila carried that line with her on the walk home. The night was still, no sirens, no shadows moving where they shouldn't, just the city's low, steady pulse. She stopped under the hotel's sign. The Elwood Gray's light above the door flickered once, then held. Inside, Andy looked up from the counter. They just ran it on Channel 7. Your name, your face, all of it. From the stairwell, Mila grinned. You looked good on TV. Strong. Lila shook her head. I looked terrified. Same thing, Andy said, his grin widening. Later, when the last set of footsteps faded and the building settled into its nighttime hush, Lila drifted into the dining room. She chose a seat by the window, the kind where you could watch the street lamps blink in sync with your own thoughts. She unlocked her phone, opened a blank note, and typed a heading. Tomorrow. 1. Start legal process to rebrand the hotel. 2. Draft hiring ad for security officer. 3. Order new outdoor sign. For, call mom. Her thumbs hovered before adding one more line. 5. Breathe. Setting the phone face down, she leaned back in the chair and for the first time in weeks, let herself truly exhale. She wasn't at the finish line, but the turn had been made. The road ahead might be uneven, unpredictable, maybe even treacherous, but it was hers. A week later, Lila stood at the edge of the Elwood Grays parking lot, the August sun warm against her shoulders. 2 contractors were perched on ladders, working the rusted hooks that had held the hotel's sign for decades. The faded gold letters, once a beacon now dulled and weather-stained, squealed in protest as they came free. On the sidewalk, a few strangers slowed their pace to watch. This wasn't just a sign coming down. It was the closing of a chapter. The new sign waited nearby, wrapped in a sheet of white canvas. Its edges hinted at fresh paint beneath, but Lila had told no one the new name, not Riley, not even Nora. She wanted the unveiling to be a moment they all felt, not just saw. Inside, the Elwood Gray pulsed with new life. Foot traffic had doubled since the article. Local shop owners dropped off flyers, eager to collaborate. Strangers from across the borough booked rooms just to see the hotel that had stood its ground. The news crews still called, but Lila had stopped answering most of them. She wasn't chasing headlines anymore, she was chasing restoration. The changes inside were as tangible as the ones outside. The front desk gleamed with a fresh coat of paint. Framed photographs of South Bronx landmarks lined the walls. The lobby, once dusty and tired, now smelled of lemon polish and the cinnamon warmth of Nora's homemade potpourri. But Lila knew polish couldn't rewrite history. A new name meant nothing if the heart of the place hadn't truly healed. That was why she'd agreed to meet Harold. She hadn't seen him since their last tense phone call. He'd offered to send money quietly, to keep, in his words, righting the wrong. But Lila had been clear. If Harold wanted to be involved again, he'd have to show up in person. No checks in the mail. No carefully worded letters. He arrived quietly, stepping out of a town car that idled at the far edge of the lot. No entourage, no flash. Just Harold, moving with the measured pace of someone who knew he wasn't owed a warm welcome. Lila met him halfway. He looked thinner, older than she remembered. The once perfectly slicked hair was now peppered with gray, and the tailored suits had been traded for a navy sweater and dark slacks. Lila, he said, voice soft. Mr. Knox. They stood in a pause thick enough to hold the wind that teased the edge of the canvas sheet behind them. You did what I should have done a long time ago, he said finally. No, she replied, arms folding across her chest. I did what you were too afraid to finish. He flinched at that but didn't argue. Lila turned, gesturing toward the building. I cleaned it out, the records, the staff, the ghosts. But I didn't do it alone. I read the follow-up piece, Harold said. Sarah's second article. You gave the hotel back to the neighborhood. No, Lila said, her voice sharper now. I gave it to myself. Harold's gaze drifted toward the workers gathered around the old sign. What's the new name? Lila stepped closer, her voice low. She lifted one corner of the canvas, just enough for him to catch it. His eyes flicked to the letters, and for a moment, the lines in his face eased. Fitting, he murmured. You can stay for the reveal, she said. But no speeches, he promised. They crossed the lot together, a quiet, unlikely alliance. Through the glass, Nora caught sight of them and nearly dropped her clipboard. Mila elbowed Andy and whispered something that made him sputter coffee into his napkin. Still the talk of the lobby, I see, Lila said. Some things don't change, Harold replied. Inside, the air hummed with anticipation. It wasn't a crowd, just staff, a few regulars and neighbors who had seen the hotel through its worst nights. Lila climbed onto a small step stool by the front doors, hands gripping the edge of the canvas. No microphone. No notes. Just her voice, steady but full. I want to thank every one of you for holding the line with me, she began. This building has weathered storms that should have sunk it. But you were the anchors. This name change isn't a coat of paint. It's a declaration. She stepped down and gave Nora a small nod. Together they peeled the canvas free. The sign caught the late afternoon light, brushed bronze letters that seemed to hold their own warmth. The Elwood House. Beneath it, in smaller script, a place to belong. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then the applause started, soft, tentative, before swelling into something that filled the lot. Some guests whistled. Others called her name. Nora swiped at her eyes and muttered something about allergies. Harold clapped too, but from the back, letting the moment stay hers. When the crowd drifted away, he approached the front desk and slid a manila envelope toward her. I brought something, he said. What is it? Final transfer documents. This time you own the land too. No leases, no loopholes. Lila opened it. Title deeds. Full release. Clean. Unconditional. I don't want anything else hanging over your head, he said. Not from me. Not from the past. She looked at him, and for the first time didn't see the man who had handed her a wreck. She saw the man trying awkwardly but earnestly to fix what he'd broken. Thank you, she said, quiet but steady. He nodded once. Goodbye, Lila. He left without another word. That night, she wandered the lantern house alone. Each floor had its own scent. Mangrass on 2, lemon polish on 3. The sounds were hers now. The creak in the hall by 307, the slow click of the ancient elevator, the soft rattle of the vending machine coil. She stopped outside room 206, the ghost lady's room, and smiled. No more ghosts here. Back in her office, Lila opened a fresh notebook labeled Phase 2. Inside were sketches and notes. Rooftop garden, after-school reading room, community lending library. But on the very first page, in bold black ink, she'd written, We don't just run a hotel. We hold the door open, for everyone. She closed the notebook and set it gently on the desk. Outside, the new sign glowed steady in the dark. No flicker. No shadows. Just a lantern burning quietly, for home, for hope, for good. A month later, the lantern house wasn't just surviving. It was glowing. Neighbors had started calling it the heart of the block. The front porch was rarely empty. An old man with a crossword and coffee, a couple of school kids bent over homework, even Miss Rose from the flower shop next door playing dominoes with Nora on her lunch break. It wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a second home for people who didn't know they needed one. Inside, the lobby carried the scent of fresh pine and lemon polish. The velvet chairs now wore deep forest green fabric, and soft jazz drifted from the new speakers Mila had installed with her brother, just back from college and grinning like he owned the place. Near the elevator, a community board listed weekly events: Sunday poetry night, Wednesday book club, Friday open mic. One Saturday morning, Lila stood in the center of it all, coffee warming her palms, and watched a little boy drop 2 quarters into the snack machine. His grin lit up the room and something in her chest tightened. She remembered being his age, clutching her mother's hand in bus stations, praying someone would talk to them, not around them. Now she was the one building the kind of place where people felt seen. Nora passed by, balancing a tray of biscuits. You've got the face of someone about to cry, or adopt a puppy. Lila smirked. Depends how good those smell. Peach and cinnamon, Nora said. Like your mama used to make. Lila blinked. How do you know that? Because you mention her every time you're tired, overwhelmed, or stubborn. Which, if I may say, is often. They both laughed, the sound warm enough to fill the lobby. But that evening, as the sun dipped low and the lobby lights hummed to life, something cold slipped back in. Andy appeared after dinner, pale and uneasy. Guy dropped this off, he said, holding out an envelope. Didn't say a word. Just nodded and walked away. It was black, thick, expensive paper, no return address. Her name, Lila Johnson, written in precise silver ink. She slid a cautious finger under the flap. Inside, a single sheet, neatly typed. You may think you've won. You've embarrassed powerful people. But don't mistake attention for protection. Some debts don't disappear. They wait. No signature. Lila sank into the worn velvet chair, the letter trembling slightly in her hand. The words echoed in her mind like a low, persistent hum, static buzzing just beneath the surface. It had been too quiet for too long. And now this. But panic didn't rise. Tears didn't fall. Lila got up, the floorboards groaning under her feet. She walked to her office and, with practiced hands, opened the hidden compartment beneath the bottom drawer. Inside, a neatly organized row of folders held a copy of every invoice, every ledger scan, and every contact report. She slid the new note into a folder labeled Threats and picked up her phone. "Sarah," she said when the journalist answered. "I think someone's still watching." The next morning, Sarah arrived at the Lantern House, her camera and notepad in hand. She read the letter twice, her expression unreadable, before folding it into her bag. "Standard intimidation language," she said, her voice calm. "But it's real. They're probing, seeing if you'll flinch." Lila's eyes were steady. "I won't." Sarah tilted her head. "You know you're not obligated to keep pushing, right? You exposed them. The police made arrests. You've done more than most. And yet," Lila's voice was quiet but firm, "someone still thinks they can silence me." Sarah's eyes sharpened. "Then we go louder." That week, Sarah published a third article. It wasn't about the crime but about Lila, a full spread on the woman who turned a hotel into a haven. It told a story not of corruption but of healing, of the rebirth of a forgotten place. It featured the people who came back, the children who danced in the lobby on weekends, and the elderly who played bingo in the old ballroom. The article went viral, but more importantly, it went local. Donations poured in from old South Bronx residents now living across the country. Alumni from the high school across the street offered to paint murals. A retired judge who'd grown up 5 blocks away sent a check with a note for the woman who reminded this block of its worth. And in the center of it all was Lila, holding steady. The threats stopped, or maybe they just became less visible. Still, Lila didn't let her guard down. She installed security lights around the perimeter and partnered with a local community safety patrol to keep watch at night. At Andy's suggestion, she started training in basic self-defense on weekends, not out of fear but to feel grounded. One evening, after everyone had gone home, she stepped outside with a mug of chamomile tea and sat on the front steps. The air was cool, humming with late summer crickets. Across the street, the corner bodega turned off its neon sign, and a mother pushed a stroller past, nodding politely. Then a car pulled up. A black sedan with tinted windows. Lila's spine straightened, but the door opened, and out stepped an old woman with silver hair, elegant but warm. She moved slowly, deliberately, her cane tapping gently against the pavement. Lila rose. "You must be Lila," the woman said. "I am. My name is Valentina Kingston." Lila froze. "Kingston?" "Yes," the woman said. "Victor's mother. I'm not here to defend him. He made choices," Valentina said, her voice softer now, "but I read what you did, what you uncovered, and what you built." Lila didn't speak, her gaze fixed on the older woman. Valentina continued, "Victor was not born cruel, but he learned power too early and without boundaries. I couldn't stop him, but maybe now, someone like you can stop others like him." She pulled a small, worn velvet pouch from her coat pocket. "This belonged to my late husband," she said. "He was an architect, helped build housing in this neighborhood when no one else would touch it. I believe he would have wanted this to support what you're doing." She handed Lila the pouch and, with a final lingering look, turned and walked slowly back to her car. Inside the pouch was a check for $10,000. Lila didn't cry. She just stood there for a long time, staring at the quiet street, the cup in her hand still warm. Tucked beside the check was a small note from Valentina. "To rebuild is harder than to destroy, but in your hands, I believe it will last." And for the first time in weeks, Lila felt not like someone who had won a war, but someone who was building a peace. Lila stood at the window of room 301, one of the few rooms in the Lantern House that overlooked the city skyline. Dusk had fallen, and the lights of the Bronx shimmered like a quiet constellation. The floorboards beneath her feet, freshly sanded and polished just last week, felt solid and unyielding. The curtains were new, and the scent of lemon wood lingered from Nora's natural air spray. But it wasn't the view or the furniture that drew Lila to this room tonight. It was what the room had once held: chaos, secrets, the silence of things unspoken. This was where Carl had signed contracts, where the worst deals had been hidden. Now it was empty, clean, and ready for something better. Downstairs, the grand room was alive with music. Tonight was the first official community gala at the Lantern House. a celebration of survival, resilience, and rebirth. Local vendors had donated food, a jazz trio played near the old fireplace, and families filled the space with laughter. Children in second-hand tuxedos and sparkly shoes chased each other between tables. Lila had insisted the event be free. "We've already paid for it," she'd said, "with every shift, every scar, every story." As she walked down the stairs, she heard Nora's voice boom from the lobby. "Lila girl, if you don't come down here and claim this peach cobbler, I swear I'm eating it for you." Laughter followed and Lila grinned, adjusting the simple emerald green dress she'd borrowed from Mila's cousin. Mila was on stage with her guitar, singing a Nina Simone classic with a soulfulness that hushed the whole room. Andy stood near the punch bowl, engaged in a heated conversation about Knicks basketball with two retired mailmen. Even Diego, who had once scoffed at the very idea of Lila running a hotel, was now helping a group of teens carry in extra chairs. When Mila finished, applause erupted, and someone nudged Lila toward the microphone. She resisted at first, shaking her head, but then Nora gave her a look, the kind that meant, "Don't argue with me unless you're prepared to lose." Lila stepped onto the makeshift stage. The crowd quieted. She looked out at a room filled with people she once thought she'd never truly know, people who, months ago, barely made eye contact in the elevator. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder like family. "I don't have a speech," Lila began, her voice steady. "But I do have something to say." She paused. "When I was 12, I asked my mom why people always called our neighborhood the rough part of the Bronx. She told me, because people don't come here expecting to see beauty, but that's their loss. I didn't understand it then, but I do now." She glanced at the lantern symbol painted above the new fireplace, its soft glow illuminating the wall behind her. "We've been underestimated, ignored, lied to, but we've never been broken. And when this place nearly got swallowed up by greed, it was your voices, your hands that pulled it back." Her eyes found Nora, then Andy, then Mila. "I might have signed the papers, but all of you, every single one, you built this. You made this more than a hotel. You made it a home. A house with light." The room stood still for a breath. Then applause rose, not wild or showy but sincere. People clapped like they meant it, like it wasn't for a show, but a thank you. In that moment, Lila didn't feel like the girl who had dragged a drunk billionaire off the sidewalk, or the woman who had stared down threats and intimidation. She felt like someone who had finally come home. Later that night, after the crowd had gone, Lila sat on the front steps with Nora, both sipping the last of the apple cider from plastic cups. "You did good," Nora said, bumping her shoulder lightly. "We did," Lila replied. The street was quiet now, a few fairy lights still blinking along the awning. The hotel behind them hummed with residual warmth, the scent of food, the sound of mops, the sigh of old walls settling in. "I've been thinking," Lila said, "about setting up a scholarship fund for kids in the neighborhood. Call it the Lantern Legacy. Help them go to school, study hospitality, or anything really." Nora smiled. "I like it. It's a good name." "You're not stopping, are you?" Nora asked. Lila shook her head. "Not until this place is more than a comeback story. I want it to be a blueprint." Nora raised her cup. "To blueprints then." Lila clinked hers against it. "To building the future." A breeze stirred the banner above the door, and Lila looked up to see the words glowing faintly under the street lamp. "The Lantern House, a place to belong." A car passed slowly down the block, the driver nodding politely. From an apartment window across the street, a child waved. Lila waved back. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe more challenges. Maybe more letters. But she knew one thing for certain. Whatever came, she was ready. Because the Lantern House wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in starting over. And it would keep burning, quietly, fiercely, unshakably. A light for the weary. A promise in the dark. A legacy written one day, one name, one choice at a time. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes the smallest steps lead to the biggest changes. Subscribe and join us for more stories that prove compassion can change the world.